everyone. So, first of all, as you can tell, I've cut my hair. I was tired of the long hair. I've had long hair for quite some time now, and I was just tired of it. Especially since now that we're coming into like the colder times, washing long hair when it's cold, it takes forever to dry. It's so annoying. So I just cut it off for practicity and also because I wanted change. So in today's video, I'm gonna talk about all of the books that I read in the month of September. In terms of the amount of books that I read, this month was probably I'm pretty sure it was my best month of the year. I read 12 books this month, which is a lot for me, especially since I also work full time. So reading 12 books in a month is quite the accomplishment for me. I'm pretty sure I've never done that in my life. I don't know what happened to me this month, but I don't know. I just wanted to read a lot. Now, in terms of quality of the books that I read, I didn't get any 5 stars, which is pretty disappointing, but I did read some pretty good books. I also read probably the worst book that I've read this year. I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna talk about all of them. I also read a lot of horror. Again, I don't know what happened to me this month, but I think it's the beginning of fall. It always makes me want to read and watch horror, and this is exactly what I did. I read 8 horror books on the 12 books that I read. So clearly I was in a big horror mood. My mic fell off. So I don't know I don't know where I was before this rude interruption by my mic falling off my tripod. I don't remember what I was talking about, so I'm just gonna start talking about the books that I read. The first book that I finished in September that I talked about, I'm pretty sure I talked about it in my fall TBR because I was already reading it in the month of August when I filmed it. And this book is The Awakening by Kate Chopin. So I finished this book. It's about this woman who is very dissatisfied with her life. She's not satisfied with her husband, her kids, her limitations as a woman in society. She kind of just wants to do whatever she wants to do, which is pretty much what we all want, I feel like. But at the time, it was especially hard for women to do that. So obviously, she cannot just do whatever she wants, but she does it anyway. And so she starts an affair. And from what I understand, this is pretty much why the book was so controversial at the time it was written. Even after finishing the book, I don't know. I still don't really understand what was so shocking about it, but also I try to remember that it was a different time and that obviously at the time there were certain things that were not accepted by society, especially when it came to women. So in that sense, the book is quite progressive in terms of like women's rights and the emancipation of women. So for that reason, I do appreciate the book for what it did at the time and for its themes. But in terms of my personal experience reading the book, I thought it was fine. Like I don't dislike it, but I don't love it either. While I appreciate the way that it depicts women's limitations at the time, I think it's quite difficult to feel any sympathy towards the main character because she's not very sympathetic. Like for I mean, the fact that she has an affair is one thing. Personally, I didn't really care about that because I honestly didn't care about the marriage and her husband. But I will say the way she completely pretty much abandons her children and just like doesn't care about them and is just like, actually, you know what? I don't really like my children. I don't really want to take care of them. I didn't want children. I kind of want to just live my own life, disregarding the fact that I have responsibilities as a mother. That part of the book bothered me a little bit. While I understand the message that I was trying to deliver, I just it just made me dislike the main character, and for that reason I couldn't really love the book. And so yeah, it just wasn't my favorite. Then I read my first horror book of the month, which was Count Damascus by Chuck Tingle. So in this book we follow a young girl who is from an evangelical community, and one day she starts seeing a demon that follows her around and attacks her. And she also starts to realize that there are a lot of things from her life that she doesn't really remember, or really that she doesn't remember at all. And she obviously starts asking herself questions and try to figure out like what is going on. On top of that, much of the community's economy relies on this one camp, this one conversion therapy camp, which is called Count Damascus. As the story unfolds, she starts to realize some things. She starts to question the morality of conversion therapy. She starts to question their method, because the reason why it's such an economical asset to this community is because they supposedly have 100% success rate. And so yeah, she starts to question the morality of this camp and starts to wonder if maybe her memory loss might be related to it, because she also like realizes that she might be connected to the camp more than she initially thought. I thought the premise was pretty straightforward and that the book did a pretty good job at just doing what it was trying to do. I think the author accomplished what he was trying to do very well. He obviously wanted to make a paranormal horror that was centered around religious trauma, evangelical hypocrisy, and conversion therapy, and how it affects the queer community and how it like basically creates horror in the queer community because of those conversion therapy camps. So I think he did a really great job at doing that. The book was really successful. It was well written. The characters were good. It's queer. Like if I feel like if you are interested in the premise, you will not be disappointed. Personally, I liked it, but I wasn't the biggest fan of it because I feel like I kind of outgrew YA. And because I went into this book not knowing that it was YA, which is totally my fault. I didn't do enough research. I should have looked it up, and if I saw that it was YA, maybe I wouldn't have picked it up, because YA is just it's just not really something that I like to read anymore most of the time. And because of that, I couldn't love it as much as I wanted to, which is a shame, but I mean, it's not the fault of the book. So that's why I would still heavily recommend it to people who are interested in the premise, because I really don't feel like if you're interested, you will be disappointed, because in terms of quality, I feel like it's a pretty good book, but it just wasn't totally for me. Then I read another horror book, this time an adult one, A House with Good Bones by Ticking Fisher. I'm pretty sure this is my third Ticking Fisher, and it's also the third time that I give a Ticking Fisher book 3 stars. So that leads me to believe that I'm just not super into this author's books. I pretty much always think they're fine, but they never really do anything special for me. I feel like I'm not a fan of the quirky writing that she has going on in some of her books, and in this one in particular I didn't really like the quirky voice of the main character. I'm generally not a fan of this type of tone, this type of voice, and especially in a horror book. I This was the first time that I experienced it, and that really cemented the fact that it especially doesn't work in a horror book, in my opinion. I don't know, it just didn't really work out for me. But yeah, basically in this book we follow Sam, who after the death of her grandma, she gets a call from a brother who realized that their mom is kind of weird. She's acting a little strangely, and so he asks her to come see their mom to see what's going on. And when she gets there, she realizes that her mom does seem pretty different. She also notices that her behavior is really strange. She seems on edge, and also Sam starts to notice that there are things that seem quite strange happening inside the house. And so it's pretty much kind of your typical haunted house story, but with a quirky tone to it, which, like I already said, it's just just wasn't my thing. I honestly kind of didn't care about any of the characters. I didn't get attached to any of them. I didn't find any of the scary parts really that scary. So I just really wasn't a fan of it. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a fine book, and I feel like if you like Ticking Fisher, there's no reason for you not to like this one book. But like I said, I feel like Ticking Fisher is just not for me. Or style is not my favorite, and so for that reason, I don't think I'm gonna. I don't think I will read another Ticking Fisher anytime soon. Then I read Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion, which is about this woman named Maria, who is an actress in LA, who was married to this director named Carter. And the book opens with her reminiscing on their relationship, but they're going through a divorce. And we basically follow her life in Hollywood as she is quite depressed and isolated and feels alienated. And we basically follow her along a journey as her mental health deteriorates more and more as more things start happening. I thought Joan Didion's style was very interesting. Her style felt very fragmented. We basically had very short chapters that go from one scene to the next. I felt like her style was also very distant, which makes sense when you consider how alienated and distant from everything our main character seems to feel like. It makes sense that the style would reflect that, and it did. And I thought that was very interesting and very well done. Another thing that I found interesting was how there is a sense of just anxiety that permeates the whole story, which again really reflects on the main character's headspace, which really helps you just feel what she's feeling, which I don't know, which I thought was really good and was really interesting. There were also a lot of feminist themes throughout the book, with Maria's abortion, all of the medical talk, the dismissiveness that medical professionals convey to Maria when she's having her abortion and when she goes to doctor in general. There's a lot of dismissiveness about her physical pain, which I felt like was unfortunately very accurate. I thought the book was very interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to reading more Joan Didion because I love the writing style. I thought it was so unique and striking and interesting, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading more from her. Then I read The Beast You Are by Paul Tremblay, which is a collection of horror short stories. The main short story being called The Beast You Are, which is about this village which has a monster that comes every 30 years or something, and things happen. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really remember much from this story, and honestly, most of the stories I don't remember much from. There are two stories that really stood out for me and that I really liked. The first one, which was called Haunted House Tour, which is about this man who reminisces on something that happened when he was a child that was very scary to him. He basically finds this shoebox from that time in his house, and he reminisces on that scary event that happened to him. And I really liked that little short story. It was very short, but I don't know. I enjoyed it. The other short story that I really liked was I Know You Were There. I thought it was very heartbreaking. It was about grief and loss and struggling to come to terms with the loss of a loved one. And it was such an interesting concept and so heartbreaking. I really, really enjoyed that story. Honestly, I think it's my favorite story in the whole book. And to be completely honest, all of the other short stories I don't remember anything from. Honestly, I didn't really care about most of the stories. There's something about it that didn't really catch my attention. I felt very meh towards the whole book. So yeah, I like some of the stories, but most of them I don't really remember. So it just wasn't anything special to me. Then I read another horror novella, which is You've Lost a Lot of Blood by Eric LaRocca. I'd heard about what is it called? Things Have Gotten Worse Since You Last Spoke by the same author. I still haven't read it. I've heard it's really disturbing. I want to read it at some point, but I don't know, I decided to read this one first. And honestly, I feel like maybe I shouldn't have, because I was not a fan of it. I yeah, I wasn't a fan of it. I took no notes about it, so I don't even know what to say about it. I remember that there were two different stories. Basically, the main story is about this guy who kills very awful men. That character felt very reminiscent of like real serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't know if that was on purpose, but honestly it probably was. He really reminded me strongly of Jeffrey Dahmer. And so his parts were pretty interesting. I don't know if that's the right word, but they were disturbing. And I did enjoy those parts. Those were definitely my favorite parts of the book. But unfortunately, and I don't really understand this choice, that was not the main part of the book. The main part of the book was this story that the main character is writing, which is called You've Lost a Lot of Blood, the name of the book. And so it's basically a story within a story, and that story that he's writing is about this group of teenagers who are stuck in a video game, and they start dying and being replaced by clones and stuff like that. And it was just a mess. And I did not care for any of it. The story within the story, I didn't care for it at all. I was quite honestly struggling through it. I just I just didn't care. I was bored. It was very confusing to me. For like the first half of the book, I didn't even like understand why we were spending so much time on it. I was like, why are we talking about this? Like, what does that have to do with the main story? Like, I understand that this is what the main character is writing, and that it reflects on his thoughts and just his personality in general. Like, I understand that, but I felt like it didn't need to be as long as it was, and I don't really understand this choice. I did enjoy the writing style, which makes me want to read Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke even more, because I feel like maybe there is a chance that I will like it more than this book. Then a book that I was much more a fan of was Leech by Iron Ennis. So this is also a book that I started reading in August and I finished in September. It's a very confusing story, especially for the first, I would say, like the first 70% of it. You pretty much don't really understand what's going on. We follow this doctor who doesn't have a name, who we don't know the gender of, who comes to this institute, this chateau, because the Baron is sick and their previous doctor died in mysterious conditions. And so this doctor comes to replace him and tries to figure out why, like what happened and why this doctor died. There's also a whole thing about this like black weird creature that kills people by going inside their brains, inside their eye, and it was just very gruesome and disgusting. And the imagery in the book is very well done. If you're squeamish, you probably won't you're probably gonna have trouble with this book, because all of the imagery is so vivid and so gross. I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 4 or 4.5 stars. I don't remember, but I just really enjoyed it. I really liked the atmosphere. I thought it was so well done. It felt so gothic and like so gloomy, and the atmosphere was just really well done. I also really like the characters, the mystery of it. It's so well done. When you understand what everything actually is, what is going on, the reveal I thought was really well done. I understand that some people don't like this book because you are so confused for the most part of the book. Like I said, for a good 75% of it. But when everything gets revealed, it's so good. At least I thought it was really good. I thought it was a really well done. I don't know if I would. I mean, I guess it is horror. Yes, I would say it. It's sci-fi horror. It's a really well done sci-fi horror book. Then, on a completely different note, I read what is probably, surely, my least favorite book of the year. At least as of right now, it is definitely my least favorite of the year. I give it 1 star. I hated it. It's called Hysteria by Jessica Gross, which sucked really, really, really bad. It's basically it goes into that vein of like unhinged women books, which already most of them, at least the ones that I've read, I'm just not a fan of. For example, I read Big Swiss, which I didn't really like. Just generally, I feel like the unhinged woman trope is just not my favorite. I still want to read A Certain Hunger by I don't remember the author, but I still want to give it a shot because the premise sounds really appealing to me. But considering my track record with unhinged women type books, I'm not sure I'm gonna like it much, and so I don't know if I'm gonna read it right now, but I still want to give it a shot. But yeah, generally I tend to not like this type of books. And this book, it encompasses everything that I hate about this genre. It basically follows this young woman who is a mess. She's a mess. What is the book about? It's honestly about nothing. It's just this girl thinking about sex all the time, like just being really weird and really horny all the time. The way that this woman talked about Freud, I never, 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 never want to hear about Freud that way ever again. Because there is no reason for anybody to be so horny towards someone like Freud. Like, why? Why? It was so weird. So this woman basically spends the whole book being horny and being weird about it and just being really in her head and thinking that everyone around her think that she's a slut and that she's weird. And it's like she's so in her head and it's so obvious that nobody cares. Being in her head was so painful and she's so weirdly horny. I can't stress that enough. Like that is one of the things about unhinged women type books that really throws me off of it. I just hate how weirdly sexual they are most of the time. And not in a they're overly sexual because I don't really care about that, but it's the fact that they're weirdly sexual that bothers me. Like the sexual content always has to be fucking weird. And again, I understand that it's part of the book. It's a part of the genre rather. So I understand that it's no fault of the book, but it's something that I personally hate, and that is why I say that the unhinged woman trope in general is probably not for me because I just hate this aspect of it. Also, the whole oh my god, another thing. Obviously, because Freud is such a big part of this story, there is some weird, slightly incesty things going on. I'm still not really sure if they're really incesty, but they felt that way to me, and it again made me very uncomfortable. And I was like, why? It just felt like the author was making a point at doing it the most weird way possible, and I just didn't vibe with that. And that's all there is to it. Also, the writing style in general, like I didn't really enjoy. I didn't think it was that well written. Sorry. And yeah, this book just didn't work for me. Then I read my only classic of the month, which was The Haunting of a House by Shirley Jackson, that I finally read after years of having this book in my TBR. I finally read it. And I loved it. I loved it. I love a good classic haunted house story. I don't know, there's something about it that I really love. I thought it was a really good, simple haunted house story. And when you've read other haunted house story and you read The Haunting of a House, you can really feel how it influenced pretty much every book in this genre, which I really like seeing because, like I said, I really enjoy a classic haunted house story. I did think it was quite short, um, which made me want a little bit more. I don't know. I thought it was so simple that I almost felt it was maybe too simple. But I also feel like maybe it has to do with the fact that, like I said, I've read like books that were obviously inspired by The Haunting of a House and like expanded on it. And maybe I feel like That's why I felt that way about it. But I think it's a very, like, very solid story. I also really loved the writing style. Wait, I just realized that I said it's the only classic that I read this month, but that's not true. I read The Awakening by Kate Chopin. It's been a long day. Yeah, so it's not the only classic that I read this month, but it was definitely my favorite one. Then similarly, but also really differently, I read How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, which is a haunted house story, but definitely not a classic one. This is my first Grady Hendrix book. I don't know if it was the best one to start with. I have on my TBR I don't remember what it's called, the Vampire Book Club one. You know which one I'm talking about. I have this one on my TBR that I want to read, but I decided to read this one first for some reason. And it's not that I disliked it, because I know that this book was very, very polarizing. I've seen some people really, really hate this book, and I understand why. Personally, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either, but I didn't hate it. But basically, what this book is about, it's about this woman whose parents die, and so she has to come back to her hometown to sell the house with her brother that she has a very difficult relationship with. Slowly, they start realizing that there is something wrong with the house and that it doesn't want to be sold. Clearly, there are some puppets coming back to life and just doing a lot of weird things. I feel like this story is mostly a story about family. It is obviously definitely a haunted house story, but the main theme of the book is the relationship between the main character and her brother, and also the relationship that she had with her parents, specifically her mom before she died. And this was definitely my favorite aspect of the book. I loved the way the relationship between the main character and her brother was handled. I don't know if Grady Hendrix has any sibling, but if he doesn't, I would be really, really surprised, because I felt like the way he described the difficult, tense relationship between two siblings was so accurate. I felt like all the bickering and all the fights and all the different point of views of the same events was so accurate to what it's like to really have a sibling. And I really, really loved that about the book. Now, while I really, really loved that, and if the book had basically only been about that, I would have loved it. But unfortunately, it was also mostly about the puppets, and and like most people, I feel like I just couldn't do it with the puppets. I don't know. I like camp, but this was maybe a little bit too campy for me. I just couldn't take it seriously. Any of the horror that was related to the puppets, and basically pretty much all of the horror was related to the puppets, I just couldn't take it seriously. And the worst part of it is that it took up so much of the book, to the point where even the good aspects of the book I started enjoying less, because the book was taking so much time. And so that and the puppets, that didn't do it for me. And that's why I think I gave this book 2.5 stars. It just wasn't my favorite. Then I read my Stephen King of the month, which was Holly, which I'm pretty sure is the last book that he came out with. And it's about this character that I think she's in the, what is it called? The Mr. How do you say it? Mercedes? You get it. This trilogy. She's in this trilogy. And so this book follows her as the main character. She's a detective, and she's working on this case of people mysteriously disappearing. And it's basically a dual point of view. So we follow her, who is the main character, but we also follow the villains of the story, who are kidnapping people and basically killing them. And I thought that was a strange choice from Stephen King to have this dual point of view, because there's basically no mystery to the book, because from the beginning we know who the villains are, because I mean, we're not from their point of view, but we're from the point of view of their victims, so we see who they are and what they're doing and for what purpose. Like, we figured that out very quickly. So like I said, there's pretty much no mystery to the book, which I thought was kind of an odd choice. I don't know if it was my favorite choice. Yeah, I don't know. I felt pretty lukewarm about the book, which now that I'm talking about all the books that I read this month, I feel like I realized that that's pretty much what I felt like about most of the books that I read this month. Like, yes, I read 12 books, but also clearly I felt pretty lukewarm towards most of them. So that's not great. But yeah, I also felt lukewarm about this book. There was so much politics in it. I feel like Stephen King has always added politics into his books, but it's especially recurrent in his newer books. Like in the books that he's been writing ever since Trump was elected president, he will not let you forget how much he hates Trump and how much he hates his supporters. And in this book, there was also a lot of talk about COVID and anti vaxxers and all of the ways that the government handled or didn't handle the COVID epidemic. And it just, it's a choice. It's a choice. I don't mind generally politic talks in books, but in this book, it felt a little overkill. Like, I'm not exaggerating. COVID was mentioned like every other page. It was so much, so constant all the time. Like, at some point, you're like, okay, I get it. I don't need another character that comments about how COVID is bullshit and masking is stupid and it's just a flu and blah blah blah. And it's just like, I get it. I don't need 50 characters to just repeat the same thing over and over. Like, we get it. So yeah, it was a little overkill for me, and generally I enjoyed the story, but I didn't, again, like most of the books that I read this month, I didn't fall in love with it. And then finally, the last book that I've read this month, finally, because I've been talking for hours and my throat is hurting, I read Bluets by Maggie Nelson, which is a lyrical essay talking about many different topics like grief and loss and love and life and nature and art and every subject under the sun through the prism of the color blue, which I thought the premise sounded very interesting. I was very curious to see how she would do everything, but I have to say the execution was not my favorite. I did like the writing. I thought the writing was very lyrical, very beautiful prose, but a lot of the little essays that she would write, I just didn't really care for them, because basically for much of the book the author reminisces on her past relationship, again through always through the prism of the color blue. She also reminisces on an accident that happened to one of her friends and all the emotions surrounding it, and everything that felt more personal to the author I quite enjoyed. And I thought it was, like I said, it was, everything was beautifully written, but because I really enjoyed those parts and I really connected to them, I really enjoyed them. But there were also so many just random little essays about different things that felt loosely connected but not really to each other, and and a lot of the times I just didn't really understand the point of them. I didn't understand like why she was including them, what was the point that she was trying to make by including them. It's because of that I just didn't really care about them, and I also honestly don't remember most of them because a lot of them were just like random anecdotes and random information about philosophers, artists, writers, those kinds of people. And I'm sure a lot of people would find it interesting, but personally, I was too focused trying to understand why she was talking about that I just didn't really care about them. So that was Bluets. So yeah, these were all of the books that I read in September. Hopefully, my October reading month will be a little bit better in terms of quality. I did read some great books this month, but I think I gave like 4 stars, which is that's pretty low. And yeah, I hope you like this video. I hope you have a great day or great night, wherever you are. And I will see you in my next one. Bye.